Hey, welcome! We watched episode 6 of Rings of Power, so you know what time it is. Hit that intro.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody, if it's your first time, welcome. We're two dads who love all things fandom, from Star Wars to Star Trek, Marvel to DC, and Middle-earth on down to Westeros. We love it all, and we want to bring all of our insights and love of all things nerdy to you, our viewers. So if that's your pint of the finest draft from the Prancing Pony, then we're here for you, and you should definitely subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on all of our amazing content and insights from all the fandoms that we love. So thanks for joining us today. My name is Chris Matthews, and I'm joined, as always, by the stranger himself, robing it up, my buddy in the car and magical wizard, Mr. Matt Parham. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, and I gotta say, it feels absolutely wonderful to be driving around with a robe today. This would be my ensconced in velvet moment for those of you that follow George Costanza.
Yeah.
I would wear this every day if it were socially acceptable.
Right? If I could get away wearing a robe in the lab like this, I guess I kind of do in a way with my lab coat.
Well, I've gotten
but I have
called Hugh Hefner today. I've gotten called Jeff Lebowski. So, opposite ends of the spectrum there, but some people pull it off.
Yeah, some people do. All right, guys. Well, let's get right into the episode here. We're talking about episode 6 of Rings of Power called Udûn. On Rotten Tomatoes, this one got an 87%. It was directed by Charlotte Brandstrom and written by a whole plethora of people here. Let's get into this couple of minutes of telling you guys who wrote this. It's Nicholas Adams, Justin Dommel, J.D. Payne, and Patrick McKay. So some of the showrunners got their hand in the writing of this episode. Mm-hmm. So let's get right into it. From week to week, we've brought a lot of praise to this whole series and everything, and we've gotten a lot of backlash over that, and everybody's opinions on this are justified. I believe, in my book, that they are. But I did have some issues with this episode, so I didn't like this one as much. And, I kind of take this story. I like to wait and see what the end of this kind of thing is before I actually judge a piece.
Take a look at it.
A story as a whole. That's right, exactly. And so there were definitely some things in here. We got a lot of story actually shored up. We've got a lot of questions answered in this episode. For one, we had the hilt, which we guessed it, was actually a key as it came across. And, Waldreg actually was the one to put it in there with the dam and whatnot. Yeah. And with that, so apparently what happened is Waldreg got there, placed it in the keyhole or whatever that was. He knew exactly where to go. And
I know, right?
Was able to destroy this dam, and the water somehow, the tunneling that they were doing earlier in the season, was able to funnel over to the volcano and make it explode. And I'm no volcanologist, but I don't know if that's exactly how you make a volcano explode like that too. And for me, it seemed like the setup of the hilt was going to be a much more that it ended up being. I thought there was going to be some sort of sacrifice that had to be made. In that picture that you see in the watchtower, there's somebody at the bottom that's being hit with the sword, and I was like, well, maybe it's some sort of magic when it comes to this, and they have to sacrifice somebody. Maybe Adar gets sacrifices himself so that Mordor gets created, but that doesn't end up being the case. Also, why did they need the key at all in this situation? If they just had to destroy a dam, they have plenty of orcs there. They could have just destroyed the dam. Why was it such a coveted thing?
Well, and
that they needed to get?
Why would it be set up that way? Like the machinations for it hundreds of years ago. And then, the hope being that, okay, we're going to set up this elaborate device, and you got to dig all these tunnels and everything over the next several hundred years. And we hope that happens all in just the right way,
Yeah, so seems a little convoluted. Seems a little weird that this is what they would use it for. Another thing I thought that the hilt would have been used for was to bring Sauron back as well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, none of this came to fruition. Also, like the timing with this episode and how characters get to certain places and why the Númenóreans were able to find all of these folks in the village
straight away.
Just beelined it to them. It's like, wow, they have the best sense of direction. I know that they're a seafaring people and that they know how to navigate the sea and the ocean, but man, apparently they
in just
really
the nick of time too. Like, just seconds later, and Bronwyn would have been decapitated. So
yes. Oh my gosh, just perfect timing on their part. And originally,
what I was thinking, man, like, because you could tell that they were lining up the timing to save her, but I didn't realize how graphic it would get, and they start stabbing everybody slowly in the keep there, and I thought, well, that sucks for that first dude.
Yeah, it does.
Didn't get there in time for him.
And like the orcs being like brutal when it came to stabbing these folks very slowly. Yeah, too. I was like, oh my. Like, whoa!
There was lots of parts of this episode that were just horrendously graphic. Like, wow, they are going for it.
Yeah, and like like I said with Bronwyn, it's her spilling out all that blood all over the table and just trying to. And what I didn't get to, I don't know, Matt, if you understand this point, but he took out those seeds and like stuffed them into the wound. And then cauterized it. I was like, what exactly is that supposed to do? Was that like a numbing agent or something?
I was actually thinking it was a clotting agent, because there is stuff like that that people have in real battlefield kits that they give to the medic.
True.
But it also depends. I mean, people get away with, in cinema world, a lot of shoulder injuries, and I always think to myself, like, they just missed a lot of important stuff there. And I guess that's within the realm of plausible deniability. And we do have historical counts from battles where, famous historical figures were struck in the neck or the chest with arrows and lived to tell the tale. So, I mean, it's possible, but, it's also, there are plenty of people that died throughout history getting hit by arrows like that. Plus, cauterizing the wounds is great. You still got infection, which I'm sure that a fantasy series is not going to deal with the role of sepsis, and how it's dealt with in Middle Earth. But that's here nor there. So.
Right, and it's made a point throughout the books and the original Lord of the Rings by Peter Jackson, as well as The Hobbit, that it takes a long time to traverse all of these lands here in Middle Earth, but it seemed like the Númenóreans were able to cover great vast distances and within an episode to get there at the right time. So I did have a lot of problems with that as well.
It reminded me of those last few episodes of Game of Thrones season 6, when we're getting characters transported like to the far north, beyond the wall, in just a matter of hours or something. And of course, they get there right in the nick of time. Like, not just a little on point with their timing, just like any later, and the main characters would have been gone. So,
right.
It did seem a little bit like that in this week's episode as well.
Absolutely. So the show is definitely showing its cracks when it comes to the writing. And that's a great point, Matt. Those later seasons of Game of Thrones, they had finished the books, so they had to kind of write it themselves and figure out where they needed to go. So a lot of that boiling off point where, that slow boil that we got throughout those first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, we didn't have. And a lot of those really intricate plots that took them long time to get through Westeros and whatnot didn't end up happening, and they sacrificed a lot of that stuff for the plot and to get themselves to a certain point. And so that definitely seems like something that they're doing in this show as well. So great comparison, buddy. That's absolutely accurate, and one of the problems that I think is warranted in this episode. Again, every opinion is warranted. If you're going to be critical of a show, make sure you watch that show too,
Yeah.
and point
If
out
you
the
if you
actual
don't, then
problems
your
with it.
opinion is not warranted. But
It's not really warranted. It's kind of null and void if you're just going to diss on a show that you haven't
yeah.
watched. So, and overall, I still do enjoy this show, and I look forward to next week and everything. I was upset we didn't get to see the Harfoots. They're definitely my favorite part of this whole series. We didn't get to check in on Elrond and Durin, which is my favorite duo
Yeah.
here, the best friendship in all of Middle Earth, in my opinion. And once again, it just seems like we have Galadriel, and she's just like standing there with all this volcanic ash coming at her, and any sense that anybody, even elves, would want to take cover at this point.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like they play this moment and a lot of these scenes for dramatic effect. It was a really cool fight, and also I felt that, and throughout this series so far, and I really don't mention him all that much too, is Isildur. And there's a reason I don't mention him as much, is because I think that the character isn't written as well as he should be. I mean, this is supposed to be one of the great kings of Gondor, you know, him and his father and his brother, who we
Where
haven't
is he
seen
at?
throughout the show.
Yeah.
Where is he? They're supposed to be the last Númenóreans that come over after Númenor gets destroyed, and they come to Middle Earth and build up the lands there and build up their kingdoms. And so this has to be a kingly person. And I realize, you know, the showrunners, the writers are trying to create flaws in this character, show that he's a human and that he, you know, is not the most perfect person out there. But at the same time, I want this person, Isildur, to be like the most honorable person, the person that's like the best in battle as well. This is the guy who takes down Sauron in the end, and gets the One Ring. And that would bring so much weight to that scene in itself if this character was so honorable, did the right thing all the time. And if somebody like that can be corrupted by the One Ring, it would show how powerful that One Ring actually is.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like all the father-son stuff that they are doing between him and Elendil, and I think it helps inform the younger actor, younger character that we're getting. But I just don't think they're giving him enough to do. You know, he seems almost reactionary. There are a couple of times he's been assertive throughout the series and maybe showed a glint of leadership quality, but overall, just not much happening with his character.
Yeah, and I feel like they give all the best stuff to his friend, kind of like we talked about, you know, with in Book of Boba Fett. It's like Boba Fett, they gave all the really good stuff to the Mandalorian, so when it came to Boba Fett, he got none of that stuff. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, his friend is getting all the really good moments.
Right.
He got to battle Galadriel and won his position as lieutenant and everything. And I feel like it would have served the plot and the purpose of this show a lot more if Isildur was the one that stepped up in that moment. It would be a chance for him to show his honor. It would be a chance for Isildur to show his quality. If you got that reference
right.
from Faramir. You know? And I feel like they could have used that. I feel like they could have brought those two pieces in together, and taken that character out and given Isildur a moment to shine, which I don't believe that he's gotten. And, you know, in this episode, he got that little bit of time on the boat with Galadriel. I got to talk to her. It's like, who are you? It's like, yeah, exactly. Who are you? Was like, we don't know, like, what redeeming quality does this character have at this point? Yeah. But you nailed it on the head, buddy. I do enjoy that dynamic, that father and son dynamic that you were talking about. And there is some tension there because of the mother dying and whatnot. And that can be a cause of a drift between these two characters.
Man, you know, Elendil, I got to hand it to him. Excellent delivery in that particular scene when Galadriel asks him what happened to the mother. And he basically doesn't answer. And then I thought he was going to just walk off. I'm like, well, that's kind of rude. But then he just silently, you know, basically gives her.
She drowned.
Yeah, as straightforward an answer as possible, and indicating that he doesn't really want to talk about it. You know?
Yeah, Lloyd Owen, the actor who
Yeah.
plays Elendil, he is just killing it with. And I find that I like this guy the
He's
most.
got a
Like, this is the
very
character that I
regal
very much enjoy.
demeanor. I think kingly,
Hmm.
like you were saying. We need more of that in
Exactly.
Isildur.
We might see that there might be a land called Honor that shows up later that we get to see.
Yeah.
So he might actually get to be a little bit more kingly, and that's the kind of thing that I wanted for Isildur as well. And I mean, this is his son,
Yeah.
so he should have gotten some of that. But again, the writers are making a choice here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't technically agree with it. I would have done it a little bit differently myself. But again, all in all, I'm very much enjoying the show. I just have very much qualms with how some of these plots are wrapping up and who Sauron could be. And once again, Matt, I'm back on the fence with Halbrand being Sauron because of this episode itself in general, because Adar himself, we got some answers with Adar as well, which we find out he is an Uruk. And he is basically one of the first elves that was corrupted by Morgoth in the first age and whatnot. Whenever elves first came to the land, whenever they were born and became alive, they first started off on Middle Earth, and a lot of those elves migrated and left and went to Valinor. Some of those elves were left behind. Some of those elves became the green elves of Mirkwood and things like that. And then other of those elves were taken by Morgoth and corrupted, as we find out in Fellowship of the Rings that Saruman explains they were corrupted by Morgoth. Tortured and whatnot. So we find out that Adar himself is one of those elves. And so that explains it. And he also claims that he killed Sauron in this episode during the interrogation in the farmhouse there. And when Galadriel was talking to him. So that scene of Halbrand when he takes him down and has him on the ground is so ferocious, and Halbrand is so angry at this guy, and he has him there. He has him pinned down. He's like, "Do you remember me?" And Adar is just like, "I don't know who you are." And so I was just like,
yeah.
Well, that definitely could be a situation where if Adar did strike down Sauron, his spirit became this human, and so he wouldn't recognize him, but there would be that anger there. And also, after the interrogation in the farmhouse, when Adar looks up at Halbrand, who is leaving, and he's like, "Who are you?" And then they play that part a little bit ominous as well. Yeah. So, Matt, your theory still might be going.
And I also noticed that Halbrand at one point during the battle saves Elendil's life personally. Like everybody's saving Elendil's life in this episode. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that could add to the irony later that he is Sauron, if Halbrand ends up being Sauron, ends up killing Elendil on the field of battle. So yeah, we will see. But I think there's just too many winks and nods here to ignore.
So many.
I think in future episodes, we'll probably see a reason given for Halbrand to travel to see Elrond and Durin and take part in either the coronation of the Forge or be one of the first people to use it. Maybe even use it to give out gifts for everybody welcoming and accepting him as the new king of the Southlands. And what do you know? There's a giant volcano in his backyard ready to go to forge that one last ring. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely possible because that forge, when we saw it a few episodes back, is about halfway built, and we didn't check up on Elrond or Celebrimbor in this episode. So, yeah, it might be done by the next episode. They might be traveling up there and talking to the elves. I could see that being the next step, too, because, they're kind of defeated at this point. So where are they going to go? They're probably going to go talk to Gil-galad. They're probably going to go up to Elrond and gather their forces and try to regroup and things like that.
Yeah.
So that might happen. But there's still like a ton of people that Sauron might be. He might be the stranger. He might be that priest-like figure that we saw that visited the Meteor Man's location there and where he dropped down.
Or maybe we just haven't seen him at all, and he's going to be introduced
out of the blue,
the end of this season or next season or something like that.
Right. I can tell you, whoever it's going to be, there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are disappointed and,
yeah.
and whatnot. But yeah, my theory is that we will know for sure, definitely by the end of this season, who Sauron is.
2 episodes left. You think that give it away?
We have 2 left. Yeah, I think that by the end of the finale, I think that's going to be the time when we are introduced to Sauron. Apparently, too, like some people brought this up. I was having some chats with about the show. They probably can't use the name of Anator, which is the name Sauron went by when he presented himself to the elves during this time. So they're legally bound not to be able to use that name. So they had to come up with something else. So whatever they present Sauron as has to be an invention of this show.
Yeah.
So it's going to be different than the books. So you people that are out there that are screaming that this is not lore and this is not following the books, you're absolutely right. It's not following the books, and whatever they do, they're legally bound to only follow the book of the Lord of the Rings and the appendices. They can't use the Silmarillion or any of the histories of Middle Earth or anything like that. They can't use it, unfortunately. And would it be awesome if we got a show that stuck to all of the books? And wouldn't it be awesome to have like J.R.R. Tolkien alive and working on this show?
Right.
That would be amazing. And that's, I think, one of the defining characteristics of House of the Dragon and why people are so receptive to that show over Rings of Powers, because J.R.R. Tolkien is not alive and he can't sign off on Rings of Power, but George R.R. Martin is very much alive and is helping out with the show. So you can look at that show and be like, it gets his approval. He's working on the show. We can accept this for what it is. But we don't have that when it comes to Lord of the Rings. We didn't have that in the original movies with Peter Jackson as well. And so you can draw some criticism there too. And whatever was produced, whatever has been produced, is definitely outside of the lore, because J.R. Tolkien thought that any adaptation would have been too much. He thinks that his books are exactly what he wanted the story to be, and anything else outside of that would be a pale comparison to what he had written. So even Peter Jackson's movies stray from the story and wouldn't have gotten J.R.R. Tolkien's approval. So it's really hard, and it's hard for these showrunners to write a story that's compelling, that is honoring the text and honoring the legacy of Tolkien itself. So I see the point that people have on both sides of the fence when it comes to the show. But for me, I want to accept the show for what it is, and I want to enjoy it. I want to highlight the good stuff, bring up the bad stuff too. I'm not going to shy away from my criticism of it, but I'm not going to hate it just because it's strayed from the books and it's confined to what it can cover. So all in all, I'm going to give this episode probably a 6 out of 10 for my rating. I didn't enjoy it as much. I thought some of the pieces and the storyline that came together could have been done a little bit more adeptly and could have made a lot more sense for where they ended up. So I did enjoy a lot of the fight scenes and everything else, but for me, the characters and the story could have been wrapped up and presented a little bit better. What about you, buddy?
Yeah, for me, I think the action redeemed some of the story flaws. I think that the writers may have intended for us to understand reasoning out of some of just the lesser fleshed out portions of the script. Maybe the Númenóreans made it directly to that village because it's located in between where they made port on the river shores and the watchtower that they were supposed to go to. So it was on the way, And maybe Adar told, I forget the gentleman's name, that I don't know why I'm calling him a gentleman, the dude that released the but
Haldreg.
Maybe he told him in a scene that we didn't get to see, hey, here's what I need you to do whenever we're all fighting in the village. You just go up there and put in the key. Now, again,
Waldreg. His name is Waldreg.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now the key and all that I thought is a little illogical. Again, this takes place in a fantasy fictional world, though, so you can't argue too much when it comes to logic. Mainly, I take it at face value. If what I'm seeing from week to week takes me out of the experience of being immersed in that story, um,
Good
then
point.
I find fault in that. And as an audience member,
Yeah.
I don't want to have those moments where I go like, "Oh, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense." Um, and
Right.
so I'm not bothered by whether or not it follows a direct Tolkien story. I'm not bothered by the consolidation of storylines and all that sort of thing, because I still find entertainment value in the script, in the plot, in the portrayal of the characters by the actors. So I only give it a lower rating whenever I'm drawn out. And I felt myself drawn out a couple of times during this episode. But like I said, the action, the cleverness of how Arondir was able to take down a massive amount of the orc horde simply by being the only one in the watchtower. I thought that was all
Yeah.
very creative, and I thought that the effects continue to be on point, even though I don't know if it's completely illogical that a volcano erupts out of a mountain simply because enough water has been poured on it. Um,
Yeah.
it was still entertaining, despite my couple of questions about what had happened.
And you just brought up another good point. It's like, who died during that watchtower
Yeah,
incident? Because Adar made it out. It seemed like most of those orcs made it out too. It's like it didn't seem like they really put a dent in the army at all during that scene.
Well, and
it's like without a scratch either. Adar came out of that without a scratch, totally unscathed.
I likened it to the end battle Willow, where we saw virtually every main character make it out of that castle collapsing and crazy looking monsters sprouting out of the ponds and all sorts of weirdness happening, but not a whole lot of the main characters suffered much. So yeah, I think they needed Adar to get down from there. Whether or not he needed to be there, actually, marching people straight up to that gate, you could say the writers could have made a different choice, and placed him elsewhere. So who knows? But what we got is what we got, and was it entertaining?
That's what we got.
To me, I'm going to say yes, it was, and I will rate this episode at a 7 out of 10, simply because I loved how creative the different set pieces were. I did experience tension as the arrows were shot. Who's going to get hit? It could be anybody. I didn't feel like, oh, none of the main people are at risk of dying or getting injured. I felt like anybody could have been out of the plot, so to speak, because of the effects of the battle. And for me, that tension, with it being palpable like that, makes the experience very cinematic, and it feels like the plot is unpredictable. I like that. I like not knowing where the story is going. Now that we've seen a lot of the main characters survive these battles, I do wonder about what will happen in the future. Will it be this easy for them to get out of different scrapes that come their way and obstacles and that sort of thing? Can we just expect that none of our main characters will really have to worry, that they'll just be immortal till the plot is over? That kind of stuff does bother me. So with that in mind, we'll see where it goes. 7 out of 10 for me, 6 out of 10 for you.
Yeah.
All in all, not a bad episode, but not the best.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, Matt, too, about how this episode did draw me out as well. Like, and that's the only time that I really am harsher on shows is when I'm drawn out of the story. I like to be immersed in the story. I like to dive into these things and enjoy it for what it is. So totally agree with you on that. It doesn't mean that the show is all doomed and terrible. But this episode was not my cup of tea. So 6 out of 10 for me and 7 out of 10 for Matt. All right, do we have anything else before we depart these lands of Middle Earth and the newly formed Mordor?
I don't think so, man. Other than I'm just going to go home and get out my baking soda and vinegar and see what I can find by adding a little bit of water to it. So,
we're going to do some experiments here on Fatherly Fandom to see if water will actually cause a volcano to explode. And get back to you next week on that. But it's been a lot of fun, guys. We'll be reviewing House of the Dragon this week, as well as Andor and She-Hulk. So, and the next episode of Rings of Power. So join us all for that fun content. We'll have some spooky movies this month too. It's Spooktober. So we'll be watching some scarier movies as well and talking about those. So look forward to that later on. But it's been a lot of fun, and we hope that you guys have a great day today. And we will see you later. And from our families to yours.
Have a good one.
Adios.